I worshipped this mother from my dream. But the woman standing by Popo's bed was not the mother of my memory. Yet I came to love this mother as well. Not because she came to me and begged me to forgive her. She did not. She did not need to explain that Popo chased her out of the house when I was dying. This I knew. She did not need to tell me she married Wu Sing to exchange one unhappiness for another. This I knew as well. Here is how I came to love my mother. How I saw in her my own true nature. What was beneath my skin, inside my bones. It was late at night when I went to Popo's room. My auntie said it was Popo's dying time, and I must show respect. I put on a clean dress and stood between my auntie and uncle at the foot of Popo's bed. I cried a little, not too loud. I saw my mother on the other side of the room, quiet and sad. She was cooking a soup, pouring herbs and medicines into a steaming pot, and then I saw her pull up her sleeve and pull out a sharp knife. She put this knife on the softest part of her arm. I tried to close my eyes, but could not. And then my mother cut a piece of meat from her arm. Tears poured from her face, and blood spilled to the floor. My mother took her flesh and put it in the soup. She cooked magic in the ancient tradition to try to cure her mother this one last time. She opened Popo's mouth, already too tight from trying to keep her spirit in. She fed her the soup. But that night, Popo flew away with her illness. Even though I was young, I could see the pain of the flesh and the worth of the pain. This is how a daughter honors her mother. It is so deep, it is in your bones. The pain of the flesh is nothing. The pain you must forget. Because sometimes that is the only way to remember what is in your bones. You must peel off your skin and that of your mother, and her mother before her, until there is nothing. No scar, no skin, no flesh. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. This is one of those rare real-time videos on my channel. I usually, if you see something real-time on this channel, like, you know, current, it's because it's a community post or I've done a short. But I typically film my actual content a month in advance. If you've followed the channel for any amount of time, you know that I have a travel job and I work a lot of hours. And I'm also the caregiver for a disabled parent. So I have a pretty busy life, and I've got, you know, 2 college-age stepkids. They keep me pretty busy. Husband, all that good stuff. So I have a pretty active life. And, you know, I try to stay out ahead of things. But the video that I have set to premiere on, I believe it would be July the 7th, this Sunday, I have moved that video to August. Yeah, so never look at her hair and think that you know what day of the week. You don't. The hair changes. I do update on the community tab my hair in real time, but I'm always changing my hair because that's what I do. Color is fun. But I've had some real-time things happen, and it has brought me back around to remembering that even in our worst times, we need some escapism, and also how valuable it is to find those means of escapism that help support our emotions and our spirits in the worst times. And one of those for me are books by female Asian authors. You know, that's a favorite niche genre that I love. And today I'm looking at Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. Now, let's remember, we evaluate works within their context. There is no judgment on a society or its rules, because we all grew up in different places with different norms and values. So I would never say that my norms and values trump yours, or vice versa, because we are all socialized differently. But it is always really good to explore, especially hard topics and hard events in life, through the lens of fiction, because it provides a bit of a safety net for your emotions, because it's not necessarily what's exactly happening to you, but it's a place for your emotions to go live. Like, you know, when you watch a sad movie when you're feeling down because you just want to cry, that's okay. Or sometimes people, when they're sad, they want to watch a comedy to lift themselves out of it. It's okay to have that detachment. You know, one of the reasons I love Warhammer so much is it lets you explore the deep topics and consequences of war without having to read about real history. Because, you know, I read real history. You know, I've read Night and Day. I've read everything Elie Wiesel ever wrote. I've read everything Corrie ten Boom wrote. You know, but sometimes you don't want as real can be. Sometimes you just gotta detach a little bit, and that helps preserve us. And I came back to Amy Tan this week because she is an author, probably just one of the best modern literary treasures we have. My favorite modern authors, as far as this particular, you know, type of book that I like, would be Amy Tan at the top. She's the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And then, of course, I love Lisa C. Her most recent work that I'm reading Women of the Sea right now, but I just finished Lady Tan's Circle of Women. My God, that is a book. Not for kids, but it is a book. Ooh, and it's a good one. And then Anchi Min. I'm going through her book on my channel, a couple of her books, Empress Orchid, and just the tale of the last Empress of China. It's really, really good. But this particular story, and one of the things I love about Amy Tan, is she focuses so much on the relationships between mothers and daughters. I mean, I know, shocker, but I'm a daughter. I'm a mother. And my mother is also a daughter and a mother. And in this book in particular, there's a really famous line in here, and I think it made it into the Joy Luck Club movie, was that mothers and daughters are like stairs. We go up, we go down, but always going the same way. And the reason this book has come to me so strongly right now is, you know, if you follow my channel, you'll know that a week ago I was in Mexico with my Taekwondo team, having a blast, working with kids, doing Taekwondo stuff. I just tested for my 6-degree black belt. That's the whole thing. And the day after we got back, my mom went to the hospital, and she was put in hospice care. Now, I don't tell you that to bring down your day. That's just real life. And even though this is fiction, it's based on real life. You can feel the stories that Amy Tan has collected when she writes her books. But, you know, I've been my mom's caregiver for a long time now, more than a decade. It's just been me and my mom against the world. And then I got married last year, and I'm blessed to have a husband who knew that bringing me into his life meant bringing my mom as well. But now I am caring for my mother at the end of her days. And last weekend, I had a lot of emotions to work through. A lot. I'm still working through them. But I also know that there's business to be about, because when you're caring for someone, the emotions matter. But we have to find other ways to deal with those so that the person who needs care can be cared for properly. So I came back to a story that supports the complexity and beauty and mystery that is the mother-daughter relationship. And this particular story within Joy Luck Club is so striking that I just had to come back to it, because it is such a beautiful picture of, no matter what happens in our lives, you know, we still have to come back and honor the people that gave us life. I understand there are other circumstances. I'm not talking about that right now. But for those of us who have the ability to come back and honor our parents, if life proceeds in the natural order, parents are supposed to precede children. That's how it's supposed to work. Doesn't make it any less sad, because when we're 15, we don't think about life without our parents. We don't think about that until it happens. And there's so much about our parents we don't know, which is what's so great about this story. Is the Joy Luck Club is set up as 4 mothers and 4 daughters. And there's a group of older ladies from China who have a very tight bond with one another. And they have a mahjong club called the Joy Luck Club. And they have basically been friends for such a long time. But because they have gone through so many similar hardships coming from China through the Communist Revolution, and their daughters are raised in America and have a completely different view of life than their mothers do. And it makes us remember that we weren't there for our parents' childhood. We weren't there for their hardest moments, more than likely. There are things about our parents we'll never know. And one of the 4 members of the Joy Luck Club has passed away. And they are basically expecting her daughter to take her place. And so her daughter comes to the Joy Luck Club to replace her mother. And she sits in her mother's seat, which is at the east. Because, we got to feng shui this thing. Because the east is where things begin. And her mother was the beginning of the Joy Luck Club. And it's not complete without that seat being filled. And then we get taken into the next chapter, which is her mother's memories. And we get to go through An Mei's story, which is this girl's mother, of her life in China as a little girl, remembering her own mother and things that happened to her. And she crafts such a beautiful telling of honoring and seeking to understand what we never understood. Because we weren't there for our parents' childhoods. We weren't there for the pains they experienced. They may have been there for ours, but we weren't there for theirs. And we wonder, why are my parents this way? Like the 4 daughters who have grown up in America, they don't understand why these 4 women who basically should have nothing in common cling so tightly to each other. Why all their husbands are forced to be golf buddies together, and why all these children are forced to play together. Why there's such fierce competition between these women to prove who's got the best children, who have grown up to be the most wonderful and successful. Because these women went through some hardships. And An Mei, our departed member of the Joy Luck Club, takes us back into her childhood, where she herself had to witness her mother do something incredible for her grandmother upon dying, the making of the flesh soup. That was an old tradition of a daughter giving the ultimate sacrifice in willingness to save her mother's life. And the reason An Mei's mother had to do that was because she was kicked out of the house. A terrible circumstance happened to her. She was widowed and had a daughter, which would be An Mei. And An Mei's mother, was a respectable woman. She returned to live with her aunt, uncle, and her mother, as she should. But not doing anything bad, being a very good girl. A rich lady invites her to mahjong. And she thinks it's because the rich lady wants to be her friend. And she's naive and dumb, because back then they didn't let girls out of the house to have any life experience. So she didn't know she was being set up. And this rich woman is actually one of the wives of a very rich businessman. Because, gotta remember, women back there weren't rich on their own in that country. Not typically. And she invites her to a mahjong game and gets her inebriated. And I think, if I remember the story correctly, she may have even been drugged. And she lets her husband into this woman's room, into An Mei's mother's room. And you can finish that thought, because what you're thinking is exactly what happened. And when she returned to her own parents, her own family, and tells them what happened to her, they don't believe her. They kick her out as a dishonorable woman who has shamed the family and shamed the memory of her husband by laying with another man. And this man got her pregnant. And so now she's pregnant, been cast out by her family, including her mother. Her mother kicked her away. And she has to go back to this man that, yeah, because where else could she go? And she does end up giving birth to a boy. And to add insult to injury, the wife that set her up claimed that boy to be her own son. So she doesn't even get her own child to be hers. I know, right? But even after all of that and everything she suffers, Anmei's mother returns to Anmei's grandmother's side, which that is Popo, grandmother. And she pays the ultimate honor to her mother on her deathbed, which is to make the soup out of her own flesh, symbolizing that I, as a daughter, would give my own life to see you made well. Even though we know that that's not medically going to do anything, the point is not the medical purpose. The point is the symbolism of the gesture that I would give my life for you if it meant you would live. And Anmei sees this. And she sees what ultimate forgiveness looks like. Because that's the hardest part, because no child comes with a book. There's no, I don't care how many parenting books are written, ain't none of them right, because every kid is different. But there's equally no books on how to be a kid. We don't often do everything correct when it comes to loving and respecting our parents, just as they might not do everything correct in raising us. And it's imperfect people being raised by imperfect people, or raising imperfect people, and we're just all imperfect together. But it's such a pure, poignant picture of forgiveness, because even though Anmei's mother was cast out by the family, she still came back to forgive and honor her mother. Because I would bet that Anmei may, through the experience that she had, not a good one, let's keep clear about that she may have learned things about her mother and understood things that she never understood before, because you have to understand that she came from a society where women didn't have a lot of options. Again, we're not judging, it just is. That's the context of the story. But there were no options. There was no place for women with babies and no husbands. That just was not a thing. And very much the concepts of purity and all of that were basically on a woman's back, and men could get away with it, just about anything. Now, it was also, a day and age where had the girl's father been alive, he might go and taken him out. That's also a possibility. But that's not what happened. Anmei's mom got kicked out, and she still forgave her mother. Because at the end of it, when people are passing and we love them and they love us, even if their love was imperfect, what good does it do to hold on to bitterness? What good does it hold on to bad feelings? Everyone has things happen. Everyone, look at me. Everyone. I don't care how happy you think that person next to you is. You don't know them. You don't know their story. Everyone has a story. Everyone. But we also all have a future. And it's full of blank pages. And when you're finally of a place for a name where you can have agency, you have free agency over your life, you can fill in those pages the way you want. And we just let the past become memories. And then maybe those memories become whispers. And then eventually those whispers fade. And we can only see the beauty of what can be. These are the stories the girls don't know about their mothers and what they've gone through. And when I think about my mom now, coming to the end of her time, there are things about my mom I'll never know. I won't completely know what her childhood was like. There's no way for me to. I mean, she got 6 brothers and sisters. But I'll never know completely what everything in their life was like. I got bits and pieces. My father had 4 siblings. I mean, they just had babies back then. That's what they did. There's 2 in my family. 2. Brother, me. We'll never completely know how our parents met or what made them decide, however long they were together, why they would be there. My mom is a widow. She was married to my father when he passed 17 years ago. And that's a heavy burden to bear because they were together for 35 years. And she's carried that a long time. And here at the end of her time, I'm thinking about those things and how they weigh on her and how I can't possibly imagine what that would be like. I never even considered it because I've been married before my husband I have today, but I was divorced when I was 23, so that's a long gone memory for me. I never saw myself meeting someone that matters. I never really understood what that pain would be like until I met a man worth being with. And now I'm like, I don't want to do life without him. I kind of get it more now. And as we get older and we have more experience and we see more things, we're blessed to better understand where other people in our lives, especially those who are older than us, why are they like this? Why do they think this way? Why do they engage with the world this way? Why did they engage with me the way they did? And it helps us kind of fill in the pieces, and then it gives us a settled spirit. This is a beautiful work of fiction, and I'm not going to call it a hard read, but I will call it an emotional read. She does a really good job of helping us understand the depth of these relationships, that nothing is as simple as, why won't you just tell me? Because there have been times where I've asked my mom over the years when I can see she's having an emotion or a memory about something. I'll say, well, just tell me. Because I'm a communicator. I'm a communicator by profession, can you tell? And sometimes she wouldn't always communicate with me. And I would like, well, why don't you just tell me? And then I can go fix it. Everyone can't tell. Everyone can't say. Sometimes people just hold it here, and it stays with them forever. And this is one of those works that helps me understand that. And that at this time, it is my duty as a daughter to take care of my mother and to put her first. But also to remember that I need escapism, and you do too. The Joy Luck Club was formed by 4 women who went through incredible trials growing up and in their young adulthood. And they did not want their own children to go through those things. But they formed a bond together. And that gave them joy. And when they were together, that was their luck. And that is a cord of love, a bond that simply cannot be broken by anything. And it is their greatest wish that their daughters would eventually take all their places at the table and continue on in that bond of love. Because none of them could solve each other's problems, but they could be there for each other and understand. Maybe they didn't have to share every story, but they knew they were sitting across from 3 other people who got it, who understood what it was like. And it reminds us that sometimes we just have to decide that we don't need to know everything and just accept what is and live in the moments that we have, because tomorrow is not promised to anyone. But seeing these women who have gone through so much purposely find time to have fun, because there's some stories in this book that are just like, oh. I mean, there's one. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Go read the book, then watch the movie. Read the book first. Love the movie too. Both wonderful. But Mahjong is their escapism. It's their way to step out of reality for a little while. It's a really good thing. Friends, if you're going through a thing, we're all going through something. Everybody is. Read the book. Play the video game. Watch the anime. Dress up and go to the convention. Put on your favorite cat ear hoodie and take a walk. Wrap yourself up in your Hello Kitty blanket. Grab your favorite box of wine, a couple of snacks, and binge watch your favorite horror movies, whatever it takes. Because life is hard. It doesn't stop getting hard. And the older you get, the harder it gets. And we have these things to blessedly take our mind off of it for a little while. Everywhere you can have your own little Joy Luck Club. Is it with friends you game with? Do you have a group of folks you play basketball with? Is it kayaking on the weekend? Is it practicing martial arts? What is your Joy Luck Club? Because once my mother passes, that will be both of my parents gone. And in my generation of the family, my brother and I will be the first of our generation to have lost both parents. We must find our joy and our luck and those ways to be together and enjoy the people we have. And that's such a great lesson from this book, that even though everything out here might be crazy and chaotic and there's so much happening, find your joy. Celebrate the luck of having each other. And even though we don't know all the stories of our parents and the people in our lives, we can respect that their story matters. That their time on this planet matters because it mattered to you. And their memory lives. I'm going to back up in this chapter and tell you all of Aunt May's mother's story. Reading from The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. Aunt May Hisu. Scar. When I was a young girl in China, my grandmother told me my mother was a ghost. This did not mean my mother was dead. In those days, a ghost was anything we were forbidden to talk about. So I knew Popo wanted me to forget my mother on purpose. And this is how I came to remember nothing of her. The life I knew began in the large house in the Ningpo with the cold hallways and tall stairs. This was my uncle and auntie's family house where I lived with Popo and my little brother. But I often heard stories of a ghost who tried to take children away, especially strong-willed little girls who were disobedient. Many times Popo said aloud to all who could hear that my brother and I had fallen out of the bowels of a stupid goose, 2 eggs that nobody wanted, not even good enough to crack over rice porridge. See, she said this so that the ghost would not steal us away. So you see, to Popo, we were also very precious. All my life, Popo scared me. I became even more scared when she grew sick. This was in 1923, when I was 9 years old. Popo had swollen up like an overripe squash, so full her flesh had gone soft and rotten with a bad smell. She would call me into her room with the terrible stink and tell me stories. "Aunt May," she said, calling me by my school name. "Listen carefully." She told me stories I could not understand. One was about a greedy girl whose belly grew fatter and fatter. This girl poisoned herself after refusing to say whose child she carried. When the monks cut open her body, they found inside a large white winter melon. "If you are greedy, what is inside you is what makes you always hungry," said Popo. Another time, Popo told me about a girl who refused to listen to her elders. One day, this bad girl shook her head so vigorously to refuse her auntie's simple request that a little white ball fell from her ear and poured all her brains, as clear as chicken broth. "Your own thoughts are so busy swimming inside that everything else gets pushed out," Popo told me. Right before Popo became so sick, she could no longer speak. She pulled me close and talked to me about my mother. never say her name," she warned. "To say her name is to spit on your father's grave." The only father I knew was a big painting that hung in the main hall. He was a large, unsmiling man, unhappy to be so still on the wall. His restless eyes followed me around the house. Even from my room at the end of the hall, I could see my father's eyes watching me. Popo said he watched me for any signs of disrespect. So sometimes when I had thrown pebbles at other children at school or had lost a book through carelessness, I would quickly walk by my father with a know-nothing look and hide in the corner of my room where he could not see my face. I felt our house was so unhappy. But my little brother did not seem to think so. He rode his bicycle through the courtyard, chasing chickens and other children, laughing over which ones shrieked the loudest. Inside the quiet house, he jumped up and down on Uncle and Auntie's best feather sofas when they were away visiting village friends. But even my brother's happiness went away. One hot summer day when Popo was already very sick, we stood outside watching a village funeral procession marching by our courtyard. Just as it passed our gate, the heavy framed picture of the dead man toppled from its stand and fell on the dusty ground. An old lady screamed and fainted. My brother laughed and Auntie slapped him. My auntie, who had a very bad temper with children, told him that he had no soul. No respect for ancestors or family, just like our mother. Auntie had a tongue like a hungry scissor eating silk cloth. So when my brother gave her a sour look, Auntie said our mother was so thoughtless she had fled north in a big hurry without taking the dowry furniture from her marriage to my father, without bringing her 10 pairs of silver chopsticks, without paying respect to my father's grave and those of our ancestors. When my brother accused Auntie of frightening our mother away, Auntie shouted that our mother had married a man named Wu Sing, who already had a wife, 2 concubines, and other bad children. And when my brother shouted that Auntie was talking like a chicken without a head, she pushed my brother against the gate and spat on his face. "You throw strong words at me, but you are nothing," Auntie said. "You are the son of a mother who has so little respect she has become me, a traitor to our ancestors. She is so beneath others that even the devil must look down to see her." That is when I began to understand the stories Popo taught me, the lessons I had to learn from my mother. "When you lose your face, Aunt May," Popo often said, "it is like dropping your necklace down a well. The only way you can get it back is to fall in after it." Now, I could imagine my mother, a thoughtless woman who laughed and shook her head, who dipped her chopsticks many times to eat another piece of sweet fruit, happy to be free of Popo, her unhappy husband on the wall, and her 2 disobedient children. I felt unlucky that she was my mother, and unlucky that she had left us. These were the thoughts I had while hiding in the corner of my room where my father could not watch me. I was sitting at the top of the stairs when she arrived. I knew it was my mother, even though I had not seen her in all my memory. She stood just inside the doorway so that her face became a dark shadow. She was much taller than my auntie, almost as tall as my uncle. She looked strange, too, like the missionary ladies at our school who were insolent and bossy in their too tall shoes, foreign clothes, and short hair. My auntie quickly looked away and did not call her by her name or offer her tea. An old servant hurried away with a displeased look. I tried to keep very still, but my heart felt like little crickets scratching to get out of a cage. My mother must have heard because she looked up. And when she did, I saw my own face looking back at me. Eyes that stayed wide open and saw too much. In Popo's room, my auntie protested, "Too late! Too late!" as my mother approached the bed. But this did not stop my mother. "Come back. Stay here," murmured my mother to Popo. "New Year is here. Your daughter is back." Popo's eyes were open, but now her mind ran in many different directions, not staying long enough to see anything. If Popo's mind had been clear, she would have raised her 2 arms and flung my mother out of the room. I watched my mother, seeing her for the first time, this pretty woman with her white skin and oval face, not too round like Auntie's or sharp like Popo's. I saw that she had a long white neck, just like the goose that had laid on me, that she seemed to float back and forth like a ghost, dipping cool cloths to lay on Popo's bloated face. As she peered into Popo's eyes, she clucked soft, worried sounds. I watched her carefully, yet it was her voice that confused me, a familiar sound from a forgotten dream. When I returned to my room later that afternoon, she was standing there, tall. And because I remembered Popo told me not to speak her name, I stood there, mute. She took my hand and led me to the settee, and then she also sat down as though we had done this every day. My mother began to loosen my braids and brush my hair with long, sweeping strokes. "Anme, have you been a good daughter?" she asked, smiling, a secret look. I looked at her with my know-nothing face, but inside I was trembling. I was the girl whose belly held a colorless watermelon. "Anme, you know who I am?" she said with a small scold in her voice. This time I did not look for fear. My head would burst and my brains would dribble out of my ears. She stopped brushing, and then I could feel her long, smooth fingers rubbing and searching under my chin, finding the spot that was my smooth neck scar. As she rubbed the spot, I became very still. It was as though she were rubbing the memory back into my skin. And then her hand dropped, and she began to cry, wrapping her hands around her own neck. She cried with a wailing voice that was so sad. And then I remembered the dream with my mother's voice. I was 4 years old. My chin was just above the dinner table, and I could see my baby brother sitting on Popo's lap, crying with an angry face. I could hear voices praising a steaming dark soup brought to the table, voices murmuring politely, "Ching, ching, please eat." And then the talking stopped. My uncle rose from his chair. Everyone turned to look at the door, where a tall woman stood. I was the only one who spoke. "Ma!" I had cried, rushing off my chair, but my auntie slapped my face and pushed me back down. Now everyone was standing up and shouting, and I heard my mother's voice crying, "Aunt May! Aunt May!" above the noise, Popo's shrill voice. "Who is this ghost? Not an honored widow? Just a number 3 concubine. If you take your daughter, she will become like you. No face, never able to lift up her head." Still my mother shouted for me, and I remember her voice so clearly now. "Aunt May! Aunt May!" I could see my mother's face across the table. Between us stood the soup pot on its heavy chimney pot stand, rocking slowly back and forth, and then with one shout, this dark boiling soup spilled forward and fell over my neck. It was as though everyone's anger were pouring all over me. This was the kind of pain so terrible that a little child should never remember it, but it is still in my skin's memory. I cried out only a little, because soon my flesh began to burst inside and out and cut off my breathing air. I could not speak because of this terrible choking feeling. I could not see because of all the tears that poured out and washed away the pain, but I could hear my mother's crying voice. Popo and Auntie were shouting, and then my mother's voice went away. Later that night, Popo's voice came to me. "Aunt May, listen carefully." Her voice had the same scolding tone she used when I ran up and down the hallway. "Aunt May, we have made your dying clothes and shoes for you. They are all white cotton." I listened, scared. "Aunt May," she murmured, "your dying clothes are very plain. They are not fancy because you are still a child. If you die, you will have a short life and you will still owe your family a debt. Your funeral will be very small. Our mourning time for you will be very short." And then Popo said something that was worse than the burning on my neck. "Even your mother has used up her tears and left. If you do not get well soon, she will forget you." Popo was very smart. I came hurrying back from the other world to find my mother. Every night I cried, so both my eyes and my neck burned. Next to my bed sat Popo. She would pour cool water over my neck from the hollowed cup of a large grapefruit. She would pour and pour until my breathing became soft and I could fall asleep. In the morning, Popo would use her sharp fingernails like tweezers and peel off the dead membranes. In 2 years' time, my scar became pale and shiny, and I had no memory of my mother. That is the way it is with a wound. The wound begins to close in on itself to protect what is hurting so much. And once it's closed, you no longer see what is underneath, what started the pain. And after this follows Aunt May's forgiveness to her mother on her deathbed. I must say I do appreciate all the views and kind words during this time, but I still have to keep up with those things that make me smile and happy, and YouTube is fun. I will let you in on a little secret now. The reason I originally started trying to make my YouTube become something was I am my mother's caregiver. And if you've never been the caregiver for someone who is elderly and sickly, it's not cheap. So I had hoped that I could monetize my YouTube and use it as an income source to help with my mother's care. But obviously that's not going to be a necessity anymore. So I thought, well, is this something I want to keep doing? And yeah, it is. Because it's fun. And it's escapism. It gives me a creative outlet. And there's a lot of cool people I've gotten to talk to as a result of YouTube. So I will keep still making YouTube videos. But the next couple of months are going to be a little weird. So if I don't seem as in all my videos in August, you'll know why. Because July has already been filmed. But I enjoy it. And I must say with my whole heart, I appreciate the kind words. I appreciate the support. But let me also provide you support. Because we need ways to get away from reality sometimes. And that's okay. If no one's ever given you permission, look at me in my eyeballs. I'm giving you permission to indulge in a little escapism. Because sometimes we just need it. Well, as usual, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope to see you in the next one.